Hello everyone, and welcome to another Tech Tuesday by BitCube. So today we are doing our first video for 2023, so I really hope you guys enjoy it. Before we get started, I just want to give a brief summary of what we're going to be looking at. So in this video, I am just going to give a brief explanation of how you would set up and use a Firebase Cloud Firestore. So what this means is Cloud Firestore is basically a NoSQL database you can use online for free up to a certain point, which we will get into later. But you can use this to actually create real-time data in your applications. So whenever something changes in the database, it will reflect on your app immediately without you having to call any external API or anything like that. So yeah, that is basically what we're going to be looking at today. I have created an example application for us that manages all of this data, and I will just be briefly going through it, how the setup was done, and also how to interact with Firestore. So yeah, and before we jump into the actual example, I just want to mention that if you guys already know how to use Firestore or how to basically just set it up, there will be timestamps in the video corresponding to the actual sections. So if you just want to see the implementation or just maybe the setup part, feel free to skip ahead in the video. These timestamps will be marked in the video down below. Awesome. So another thing, if you guys want to actually clone this project and just play around with it, you can also find the GitHub link in the description, and in the GitHub link on the repository there will be a detailed README on how to get the project up and running, which I will also just briefly show you when we get to the setting up the Firebase side of things, because you will need to set up your own Firebase account and use your own Firebase details, since I will not be willing to share mine. Awesome. So yeah, let's get into it. So what I have created for us is just this tiny prototype game of Tic Tac Toe. So right now I have two simulators running, um, the same version of the app. So if on the first one, I can just say play, and this is a topic we will be discussing in the future, how to do like Google sign-ins and stuff like that, but that is for another day. So yeah, I'm going to start the game. Gonna log in with my one account on the left, and then also on the right hand device I will log in with a different account. So this visually might be a bit confusing because both of them have my same name, but just focus and you guys will be fine. Cool. So first thing I want to do is my right hand device will be my challenger and the left hand device will be my host. So on the right hand device I can go to multiplayer, and you can see there are no lobbies available right now. So on the left hand device I want to create a game that somebody can join. So here I will just open up the form and enter a game name. Let's just call it, whoops, test game. Submit that. And then as you can see on the right hand device it immediately picked up that a lobby has been created and it will display it. So now if you look on the left hand screen you will see that me, the host, is currently set, but I'm not readied up yet, and I'm currently facing absolutely no opponent. So if I go on the right hand device actually join this game, if you guys focus on the waiting side here, you'll see that if I join, immediately it picks up that I have joined the game. So now same thing here, if I say ready, you can see that it picked up on the other device as well. And if I ready up on the left hand side, same thing happens. So now you can see that currently it says the host, me, it's my turn. So if I go on the challenger device, which is waiting, you'll see that I'm not able to do any moves because it's not my turn yet. But if I go on the left hand device and I just make a move, you will see it displays on both sides. So now let's just play a tiny bit of the game. Just going to, for time's sake, purposely lose this for the circle device. So there you can see the game has been finished. It picks up who was the winner, in this case the host, loser, the challenger. So after that is done, I can go back out, and you can see now the game is done, so it doesn't display in the lobby. And if I go out here again, and I can go to the lobby, and you'll see there is no game at all left. Another cool feature about these real-time databases, the way, if you, depending on the way you set it up, you can actually manage the states of the game to be persistent. So in this case, if I do create another test game, and I submit this, and I go to multiplayer for this guy, I join the game again, and let's say just me as the challenger says I'm ready, and me as the host, I leave the game. Currently I'll be waiting as a challenger for quite a while, but at least if I go to multiplayer now as the host, you'll see I can still join the same game and then just continue from wherever I picked I left off. So if I play the game on the right hand device, do a move, and I leave the game for both users, if I go back to the multiplayer section, for both users, the same game will still be picked up. And we can just continue from wherever we left off. So yeah, this example is basically what we are going to be doing today for the Firebase Cloud Store explanations. So yeah, I hope you guys are looking forward to it. And again, like I said, all the code will be in the GitHub repository. You guys can play around with this and also extend it to make something even better. Because as you noticed, the game is definitely still a prototype. After you've won, there are no pop-up messages and stuff like that. And there are a lot of capabilities you can still implement into this app, like leaderboards and stuff like that, which is also simple from the point of where this has been implemented already. But yeah, that was just the example. So next we'll get into setting up Firebase on your Flutter application. Okay, so in this next section, we will be going through how you set up Firebase on your Flutter application. So if I didn't mention this before, this guide will specifically be for Flutter applications. But if you do want to implement this native or on any other framework, you should find very detailed documentation on Firebase's website that shows you how to do all of this. So don't worry about that. You can just look through the docs and it will show you whatever you need. But in this case, I will just be going through the Firebase, the Flutter side of things. So yeah, in order to get started, first thing that is highly recommended would be to install a nice little CLI tool called Flutterfire. Now you can do this through npm, or if you want to, you can install it through your Dart CLI. And after you've done that, you will want to go ahead and actually create a project on Firebase. So for this, you will just need to create an account on Firebase. It's 100% free. You don't have to provide any card details or anything like that. You will just be capped on the free tiers. So if you hit those rate limits, you'll just have to stop your application because nothing will pull through anymore. But yeah, so in order to do this, you can just create a project. I'm just going to call this test project. And obviously always nice to have Google Analytics enabled. And for the account, just default, or whichever one you have set up. But yeah, that's basically the start. So it's just going to go ahead and create your project on Firebase now. So I'll just skip ahead until that part has finished. Okay, so once the project has finished setting up, it'll just look like this, and then you can go through continue, and you should be able to see your dashboard now. Now, in order to actually add um, Firestore to your Firebase account, you would just want to go to the build tab, and then in there you can just choose Firestore database. So as you can notice, there are two different types of databases, Firestore and real-time. Um, Basically, real-time is what they started out with, and Firestore is just the new and improved version. In my opinion, definitely improved. But yeah, you will just go ahead and choose Firestore database, and then it'll just initialize a few things again. So it shouldn't take too long. There we go. Once this is done, you will want to create a database. So you can just go ahead and click on that. And then after you've done that, you can just go ahead and choose whichever one you're running this for. So in our case, a development environment. So we're just going to start this in a test mode. As you can see, like it shows you what the difference is. Only difference between the production and the test mode is your data will be wiped in test mode after like 30 days. Okay, so after you've done that, you can just choose your location. So you'll just want to choose the location closest to you. Then it'll just be quicker on your side, but usually Firestore is really nice. It'll work pretty decent around the world. So in my case, I'll just choose Europe. That's the closest to us, and then enable. And after this is done, a database will be created, connected to your Firebase account, and then we are fully set up on the Firebase side of things, and we don't really need to bother looking here any further. So yeah, once you're done with that, you can now open up your PubSpec file on your Flutter project. And since all the Firebase stuff has been set up now on the Firebase console, you can just go ahead and include two new libraries that we will need in order to actually access the Firebase SDKs. So those would be the Firebase Core SDK. This will just expose all the Firebase initializations as well as a lot of core libraries within Firebase, which you would need to either set up Firebase or just utilize some of its core functionality. In this case, we will only be using it to initialize Firebase. And then the second package that you will need is Cloud Firestore. So this one will be the SDK that links to Firebase Firestore, and it's the one that we will be using to read and write from our database, as well as set up streams, or as they call it, snapshots, in order to have real-time database setup. So once you have included these packages, you can just go ahead and run pub-get, which will just now download these packages into your Dart cache so that you will be able to start using them. So once those are done, you are ready to actually set up Firebase now. So after that is finished, you can just go ahead to the root of your project and open up a terminal. So from now, you are going to use that CLI tool that I showed in the beginning, Flutter Fire. Just another thing that I did not mention in the beginning is, along with the Flutter Fire CLI, you also need the Firebase CLI, otherwise Flutter Fire will just not work, since it does depend on actually having the Firebase CLI. So you will be able to download that also from the Flutter CLI doc that I showed you guys. There is also a link to Firebase CLI in the actual README of this project. So if you go there, you'll find it. But other than that, you can just go onto Flutterfire's documentation, and like at the top, there would be a link that directs you to Firebase CLI. So once you've done all this, you would first want to use the Firebase CLI, and then just use the login command. If you have the Firebase CLI and you are using a different account, you can just go ahead and Firebase logout first. But to log into your Firebase account through the CLI, you will just go ahead and use Firebase login. So if I run this, just give it a little bit of time. You'll see it already says that I'm logged in to my account, so there's no need for me to really continue doing that. But once that is done, we would want to use the Flutter CLI to actually now generate all the configs that we need to use for the initialization of our Firebase application. So this will just generate all the keys and the settings that you need. It'll also go ahead into the native Android and iOS sections of the app and just include the Google Services files into both of them, so that you would not have to go ahead and set up all of that from scratch. So what you are going to do is you're just going to run Flutterfire configure. There we go. And you'll see if this is your first time running this, it might just take a few extra prompts, but that's fine. You can just say yes to all of those prompts and you will be good. I only have to do 2, selecting my project and actually my platforms that I want to generate these configs for. Since I'm only using an Android and iOS app, not web applications or anything like that, those are the only 2 I require. So you'll see after it's done all of its work, it'll say Firebase Configuration file, Firebase options has been generated, which will then be stored inside of your lib folder. So that'll be this little guy here. I won't really scroll far in this since all my details are in here. But what this has just done is created default Firebase options, the class, from which you can now actually get your Firebase configs according to whatever platform you're currently running. So if you're iOS, getting this current platform, calling this current platform method will then give you the iOS options for Firebase. And if you're Android, same thing. It'll just give you back the Android configs for your project. So yeah, once you've done this, you'll also see that in your iOS file, here's a little Firebase app ID file that's been generated for you. And I think I need to, I can't really remember where this other one is hidden, but another file will be generated for iOS. And for Android, you'll see that inside of your app source main, where here you go, inside of source, the Google Services JSON file has also been created for you. So this just skips all of the steps of having to create all of those by yourself. So once you've done that, you can now continue to your main.dart file. This is usually where this configuration will be processed. So in your main file, you would want to do it here just because this is before anything runs in your app. So if you have anything like the analytics setup, you would always want the Firebase app to be initialized before your whole app starts, so that you can get the most out of your analytics. Or in our case, the logins or just the database interactions, we want that to be set up way before the app gets visibly shown to the user. So for this, I just created a init Firebase function. This will be asynchronous since we need to await the initialize app function on Firebase. We need to make sure that that it has been awaited, so that it has finished initializing before the app actually starts. So in order to initialize this, it's very easy. We just call the Firebase class, which get exposed from the core SDK that we actually included in our pubspec file, and through it, it has an initialize app method, which you just have to pass the platform options that you are using on. So again, this is much easier with Flutterfire since it already created this default Firebase options class for us, and through it we can just get the platform settings through the current platform getter. So this reduces all the boilerplate code that you would have had to write on your own and actually include inside of these option files. So once this is done, you'll see we have our widgets, Flutter binding, and share initialized. So this just makes sure that all of the widgets and everything has been initialized before running the code afterwards. This is very important, since if you do not do this, the timeline of your Firebase initialization could be out of sync. So then it just wouldn't be initialized. So that's a very important piece of code there. But that's just Flutter framework knowledge. Has nothing to do with Firebase. You will just usually have to have the share initialized in your main method by default always. So yeah, you'll see after that I just call the Firebase initializer, and once that is done, we are fully set up to actually use any of the Firebase SDKs. In this case, where you're going to be using Cloud Firestore as well as the auth packages from Firebase. The auth will be explained in a different video, but right now we will be using Cloud Firestore. So after this phase, you will 100% be able to, anywhere in your app now, actually use your Firebase SDKs. So once you've done all of this and you go back to your actual project, so test project in this case is just useless, but we'll go to Tic Tac Toe, the one that I created just before this. So if you go to your project and just click Project Overview, it should display something along the lines of this. It'll have since you only have Firestore enabled in this point, you will basically just see 0 reads, 0 writes. But as long as you see this little card here, it means that your application has been set up. And if you go to apps, it'll show you the apps that were registered through the Flutterfire command. So in this case, you're an Android and an iOS app separately. So yeah, that will basically cover the whole configuration process and setting up Firebase Firestore. So it's really, really, really simple to set up. A lot of the work is done for you on Flutter through Flutterfire. And after that, you are 100% ready to get started on the database. So yeah, we'll do that in this next section. Okay, so now that our configuration is done, we are ready to actually implement Firebase databases in our application. So first things first, let's go to our Firestore database. Okay, I'm just going to delete these collections. These were the ones that we were just playing around with now in the example at the beginning. So, okay, yeah. So when you go to your Firestore database, initially you will just see all of this empty data. So if you maybe have an application where you are just going to read certain sets of data, you can go ahead and actually just create all of the data yourself on Firestore and then just read it on your application, which is could be definitely could be a good idea. So let me just quickly run through how these databases are set up. So as I mentioned, this is a NoSQL database, so there won't be any type of basically relationships that you can add outside of your initial collections. So to explain what I mean by that is I'm going to use the examples that I have in the game. So this collection will be called lobbies, and for you just have to add a document for it. Using the auto IDs are usually a good idea. It just gives you a big UUID that's randomized, which is nice. But you can use anything to identify this document. It can be a string of your own or whatever for easy access, but just using the auto-generated ones usually work fine for me. So we'll just add a field here called name, and that'll just be test. So we'll save this document, and as you can see, we have our first collection made, which is lobbies, which houses many documents, which is the Firestore term for a table, basically, or a record. This will be your table, this will be your record. So you can't go and add another collection here called users and then have them linked up to each other, or at least not simply. You can do that through your code with a big process, but usually if you go anywhere bigger from that, you would rather look into using normal databases and something like sockets for real time. But in this case, um, if you want relational data, you will have to uh, do it in a bit of a smart way. So in this case, you can have a lobby. A lobby has a bunch of documents, each corresponding to a different lobby. And if you want relational database data, you can actually go into the document and then add another collection to that document. So I can go here, and a lobby has users, and this will just be me. And now you can see that through a lobby, uh, just choose any lobby that has been created, it now has a collection of users. So in this way, you can basically have very small relationships in your data, which is just basically the same as having a JSON file structure. And inside of that JSON file structure, you just have a list of different objects which relate to the parent object. So it's exactly the same in that regard. So I just wanted to do a very, very small explanation of how the Firestore data looks. It's pretty simple. It's just a huge JSON structure. If you uh, disregard the UI and look at it as an actual document, it's just a big piece of JSON data. And yeah, so let's get moving on to the actual implementation on our Flutter app. Okay, so now that we've gone through all of the Firebase console sections, as well as the actual integration of the SDK into our app, um, I will be going over how to actually set up your models and how to use the Firestore SDK in your repositories very briefly. Since I do see that I'm going a bit over time from the updated time schedules that we have. So yeah, I would suggest that you guys just clone the repo and actually go through this code yourself after I've explained it, because I think then it'll be much clearer afterwards. So yeah, let's get started. So as I've discussed on the Firebase console, the documents that you save on Firestore are literally just JSON objects. So what you have to do to get started is just create a normal Dart model. So I'm not going to be going in depth about what Dart models are or what streams are. There is a very useful series we have on the Tech Tuesday channel called Flutter Getting Started, and this has all the information you need to build up and get to this point. So yeah, first thing you would do is just create a normal Dart model that houses all of your data. So this is just a class housing all of my information for a lobby. And after that, I just want to create a mapper that changes this class into a JSON structure. So here I've created a toMap method, and inside here I just return a map or JSON object um, that just has all the key values combined that I want to see on my database. So this will be used for writing to our database. So every time I call the toMap, the lobby gets converted to JSON, and if I want to add this to CloudStore, I would just send this map object to Cloud Firestore. So you'll also see that when querying from the CloudStore databases, you can get two types of documents. Actually three, but two types of read-only documents, which would be the query document snapshot as well as the document snapshot. So if you look at these two, you'll see that there are two different types, but both of them do still give you the exact same functionality. Like they do expose the same methods for getting the data you want from them. So I'll just show you how one of them works, and then that is literally just copied over to the second one. So they do work mostly the same. The one I'm just getting a list of documents, the other one is just a mapper for a single document. So you'll see that these document snapshots, these normal ones here, are for real-time data. So these get updated every time a write is done to your database. Then this document snapshot will reflect those changes. And these query document snapshots are just the normal queryable you get if you do like where clauses or just plain gets on a collection. So you'll see if I loop through these documents, you literally they just expose some simple methods and getters. In this case, if you want the ID, you can just fetch the ID as a normal getter through the document. If you actually want to drill down and get the JSON objects, you would go ahead and use the get method. So all this does is it goes for this document, get the value for a key corresponding to whatever you give the get method. So I want to get the value from a key called lobby name, so it'll go through the document, find lobby name, and then just return that value back to me. So if these keys don't exist in your document, you don't have to worry about it breaking everything, since it'll always just return back a null object. So if you handle your null values correctly, you won't have an issue if the document or the key hasn't been found. So yeah, that's basically all there is to the models, how you would utilize them and map through them. I think the best part, the important part now is to go through the actual repository. So if we go to our lobby repository, I'll just show you guys first off how to create documents inside of your Firestore database. So in here, I just have a create lobby function. This takes a built lobby. So when you click create game, as shown in the example, this lobby gets built and sent through to this method. And then from here on, I want to take this lobby and send it to Firestore. So in order to do this, we first need to get our Firebase Firestore instance. So this is very simple. You can just use the SDK that you added to your PubSpec file. It exposes a class called Firebase Firestore, and through that you can just go .instance, and you will get your reference to your database back. So this DB variable here will contain all the functions needed to read and write to our database. So in order to actually add something to our database, we follow this path. We just go take our database and search for a collection inside of the database called lobbies. So it's going to go through the database and see if there is a collection called lobbies, and if there is not, it will create one for us. And once it's found this lobby or created it, we want to then add our we just call the add function. So this just takes a JSON structure which it will send to Firebase Firestore. So in this add function, we just add our lobby, and we call our mapper function just so that we can convert this into a JSON object. So that's literally all there is to actually writing documents to Cloud Firestore. It's just this one single line, search for a collection, and then add to that collection. And once you've done that, you will actually get the document that was created back. So this is pretty useful if you want to now go ahead and store that ID that you just created, or the document's ID that you just created to your actual model for later use. And then you can use that ID again to like update models or anything like that. So yeah, writing to the Firestore database, very, very simple. So next, let's just go ahead and see how we would update currently existing models inside of our Firestore database. So for that, I have a function here called, I have many update functions here, but we'll just go, they all work exactly the same, but we would just go through the finish game board one. So if you look at this function, you'll see first things first again, we just need to get the database instance, and then we follow a very similar path to the create. We go through the DB, we search for a collection called lobbies, and once that is done, now instead of calling the add method, we want to specifically get a document that has an ID that corresponds to the lobby that we're currently manipulating. So in order to do this, you can just use the doc method that gets exposed from a collection, and through this doc method you just send your lobby ID, which is the UUID created by Firestore, the one that we saved inside of the create method, and it'll go through this collection and search for a document that has a matching ID. Once it's done that, it'll bring back a document reference, and now you'll see that we get two types of documents back, like I mentioned before, the snapshots and the references. So the snapshots are read-only. You can only read data from them and nothing else other than that. But references are used to actually do creates on or updates. So once you have your document reference back, you can see that it exposes a method called update. If you go inside of here, you'll see it also has a lot of other methods as well. Like you can actually delete the document from here. Again, update, you can get the different values inside of it, but we just want the actual update method. So once you call this update method, the only thing you have to do is, again, just give it a JSON object which has the keys that you want to update inside of your document. So in this case, I just want to update the key is done to true, and the winner to whoever actually won this game. So yeah, again, updating documents with Firestore is very simple. You just need to give it the JSON structure and the keys corresponding to the Firestore keys that you actually want to update. So creating and updating, fairly simple. Again, for this delete, same thing. We just go through the steps of getting our DB instance. We go through the same path of getting that exact document we want, just like in the update. And since we have a reference to the document, we can actually now go ahead and delete this. So again, anytime any of the delete, the update, or the add functions are called on from your Flutter app to the Firestore database, events will then be triggered once they've resolved, and then they get sent back to your app. And once that is done, you'll see that we have, for this get lobbies method, so this is how we get all the data, we have a stream here. So once those events that I mentioned get triggered, anything that absorbs the stream will actually then get updated with the new data that has been sent back from Firestore. So in order to get these streams set up, again, you just need to get your database reference. Once you've done that, we follow a similar path again. We just want to get the collection of lobbies, but the only difference now is we want to expose the snapshot or the stream for these lobbies. So once you've done this, you'll see that it brings back an actual stream. And as I've mentioned again, this stream now has the ability to update every single time a write gets done to your database. So these streams, again, I'm not going to explain them at all. We do have a video that goes through that in a lot more detail, so I don't want to reinvent the wheel on that one. But basically, the way you would use these then, these snapshots, is if we go to where I call this function, you'll see that I've just set up a simple Flutter widget. This is a core Flutter widget called Stream Builder, and it just absorbs a stream and handles it. Um, in the Stream Builder, I've just given it a stream, which is that get lobbies stream that we've just created. And then you'll see it just has a builder class, which get called every time the stream gets updated. And inside of there, that's just your normal Flutter build context. But in here, it has a snapshot corresponding to a query snapshot. And this query snapshot will house the list of documents that we get sent back, the list of whatever has been updated or whatever exists in that Firestore database in its current state. So as I've mentioned, once you do writes to your database or updates, anything like that, deletes even, an event gets triggered from Firestore database, and that event comes back to this stream that you've just created. And the moment that event gets picked up, this builder will fire again. Only difference now is this async snapshot will now have the actual data corresponding to whatever has been updated. So I know that's probably a lot to take in, but with just a little bit of experimentation with this code, running the app, just like I did in the example, it will make a lot more sense. But yes, that is the basic way of just integrating the Firestore databases inside of your actual Flutter application. Okay, guys, so that was the video for today. If it got a bit confusing, again, you can just go to the repository I have in the description. You can read through the README. It'll explain everything from setting up the application to actually running it. And then once you do that, you can just play around with the data and everything yourself. Once you have your own Firebase Firestore setup, and once you've done that, you'll 100% actually see how it is being used and how it actually works. It's much easier to see it in practice, and it also just shows you how you can get a simple database up and running very, very, very quickly. So if I had to say the time that it took me to implement this Firebase database, it probably I could not have spent more than 1.5 hours on this whole thing. So it's really quick to work with if you need a very simple database structure. Again, if you a simple NoSQL database structure, you should 100% use Firebase Firestore. But yeah, that's basically all I have for this video. Hopefully you just found some nuggets of information here very useful. Hopefully you can start using Firebase in your application soon, because it's a really great tool to have connected to your application. And yeah, so just before I drop off, I just want to show you guys the usage for Firebase Firestore. So the nice thing about this Firestore application, if you are running a small scale application, not something you expect like hundreds and thousands of users to use on a daily basis, it's really nice. So for the free tier, you actually get 50,000 reads on your database, and a total of like 20,000 writes and deletes to your database. And the nice thing about this is not monthly. So every single day you do get another 50,000 reads and another 20,000 writes. So if you're running a small scale application that you're not expecting to grow insanely huge, you can 100% rely on literally just using the full free tier for Firebase's databases. And not just Firebase's databases, you can go ahead and use the authentication, whatever extensions they have. You can, maybe not the hosting, but you can do the Firebase functions, remote configs, even some of the machine learning. You can do all of that uh, on the free tier of Firebase only. So yeah, that was just me fanning out on Firebase a little bit. But yeah, so again, thank you guys for watching the video. Hope you enjoyed at least bits of it. And yeah, we'll see you in the next one where we are going to go through how to actually implement Firebase Authentication. So that will be a little bit of a deeper dive since there is a bit more to set up natively on like Android and iOS to get that working. Some stuff that you don't usually find in documentation, which is nice to know. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. Hope we can see you again next time. Bye.